Okay, so today let's talk about, um, continue our discussion of the 5 steps for solving equations. And we're going to be talking about multi-step equations with variables on both sides. So we're going to look first at our ELMO here. Our TOC for today is multi-step. You could put equations in there, I guess, EQ. Variables on both sides, and we're going to be on page, I cannot write today, page 30 in our math interactive notebook. Remember, you may be on a different page than this 30 because you may have used more or less pages to copy down the other notes that we have already taken. So TOC, multi-step equations, variables on both sides. And if you remember our 5 steps for solving equations: distribute, combine, rewind, solve, and check. And hopefully you're practicing your arm motions as well. Distribute, combine, rewind, solve, and check. So let's go ahead and go to page 30. We are doing multi-step equations with variables on both sides. Okay, so some things to keep in mind. You may or not have a combination and a distributive step, or distributed and combined step each time. You're always going to have rewind steps. And when you don't have distributed combination, what having variables on both sides does to us is that it causes us to have to locate all of our variables on one side. It causes another rewind step. So when you're thinking about which variable term that you want to rewind the smaller variable term. Okay? And the reason for that is if we always rewind the smaller variable term, we reduce the chance of having a negative variable term. It's not a bad thing to have a negative variable term, but without a negative variable term, we're not as likely to make a sign error when we're coming up with our answers. So let's do some of the examples that are on GP7 in your digital book. We're going to do half of them, and then you'll do the other half on your own along with the pixel art for having variables on both sides of the equation, or equal sign. So we have 8m plus 5 equals 6m plus 1. So I go through the steps in my mind. Distribute. Do I have any distributive property? No, I don't see any grouping symbols. Combination. Over here I have a variable term of 8m and a fixed term of 5. No combination. Over here I have a variable term of 6m and a fixed term of 1. No combination. So then I look at the two variable terms, 8m and 6m, and 8m is larger than 6m, so I'm going to rewind the 6m. Okay? How do I undo a positive 6m? I put a negative 6m on both sides of the equal sign. Now moving left to right, 8m plus negative 6m is going to give me a positive 2m. I didn't do anything to the fixed 5. 6m and negative 6m eliminate to be 0, and I have 1. Remember, our ultimate goal is to solve for m. That's why we want all of our variables on one side of the equal sign. That's what we just accomplished with this rewind step. Now I'm going to get my variable term alone and have all my fixed numbers on the other side. So the opposite of a positive 5 is a negative 5. And 2m equals 1 plus negative 5 is going to be negative 4. Then I want to undo the multiplication between 2 and m. So I'm going to use the multiplicative inverse and multiply by 1 over 2, or 1/2. 2 divided by 2 brings us down to the multiplicative identity of 1. So we have 1m. And negative divided by a positive is negative. 4 times 1/2 is 4 over 2, which of course can simplify to be negative 2. Okay, so that was 1 from GP7. Now we're going to do number 3 from GP7. 10b plus 18 equals 8b plus 4. I go through the same thought process. Do I see a grouping symbol? No, I do not. So there's no distributive property or no distribute step. Do I have combination? 10b is variable, 18 is fixed, not on the left side. 8b is variable, 4 is fixed, not on the right side. Then I move to rewind. Do I have all of my variables on one side? No. I have 8b on the right side and 10b on the left side. 10b is greater than 8b, so I'm going to rewind the positive 8b. Opposite of positive 8b, negative 8b. 10 minus 8 is 2. I didn't do anything to the fixed 18. Negative 8b and positive 8b simplify out, and I didn't do anything to the 4. So still rewinding. So remember, this was a rewind step. I'm still rewinding. I'm going to isolate my variable term. I'm going to undo a positive 18 by putting negative 18 on both sides. So this cancels out, bringing down your 2b. 4 plus negative 18, negative 14. Getting rid of the multiplication between 2 and b, I'm going to use the multiplicative inverse of 1 over 2 and 1/2. And I got b equal to negative 7. Remember, we're not doing the final step, which is the check step, because this was a rewind, this is a rewind, and this is the solve. So you want to make sure that you're checking or in your head or on your paper. So if I was going to check on my paper, I'd have to put negative 7 back in. So I'd have 10 times negative 7 plus 18 equals 8 times negative 7 plus 4. And if I did it correctly, this should create a true statement. So negative 70 plus 18 equals negative 56 plus 4. Opposite signs subtract, and you keep the sign of the larger sign, so that's going to be negative. 70 minus 10 is 60. 60 minus 8 is 52. 56 minus 4, 52. These are equal. I've created a true statement. Therefore, my answer must be correct. Remember, that's how you execute your check step. And to the last one, we're going to throw something more than just a rewind step in here. So number 5 on your GP7 is 9a equals 6 times a plus 4. And going through the thought process, first step, distribute. Yeah, I have a grouping symbol, so I need to distribute that 6. It needs to be multiplied by everything inside. So 9a equals 6 times a plus 6 times 4. 9a equals 6a plus 24. That was my distribute step. Combine. I have a 9a over here. So there's only one term. You can't combine it with anything. I have a 6a variable term and a 24 fixed term over here, so they don't combine. Now, here's an interesting situation because I don't have 2 terms on both sides like I did in examples 1 and 3, where I had a fixed term and a variable term on both sides of the equal sign. So in this case, when I look to what is the larger of the 2 variable terms, it is 9a. But what if it wasn't 9a? What if it was the one that was over on the right side, which also has a term. When you come upon this, where you have just a variable term on one side and a variable term on the other, but there's not a fixed term on both sides, you want to rewind the variable term that's on the side with more terms. Why? Because our ultimate goal is to get our variable term on one side versus our fixed numbers on the other, followed by one of the variable equal the fixed number. So I'm going to rewind the 6a. So positive 6a, I rewind it by using a negative 6a. And I wind up with 3a equals 24. So that was a rewind. 3 and a are multiplying. I rewind by multiplying by the multiplicative inverse of 1/3. And I get a equals 24 over 3, or a equals 8. But I wanted to show you what would happen if I did not rewind the 6a, but I rewound the 9a. So 9a equals 6a plus 24. So if I chose to rewind the 9a, over here I create a 0. And that's fine, I can create a 0, because as long as I do the same thing to both sides, I'm good. But now I've created an extra step for myself, because I'm going to have to get my variables on one side versus my fixed numbers on the other. So I wind up in the same spot as I did over here, but it took me 2 steps to get there instead of 1. So that's why when you have a term by itself on one side versus 2 terms on the other, the term you want to rewind is going to be matching with this side. Okay, so that you have fixed numbers equal your variables, or variables equal your fixed numbers. That's your initial goal in solving the equation. So those are your examples to help you get started on solving multi-step equations with variables on both sides. If you have questions, make sure you reach out. And you have 3 more questions to do in your GP on GP7, and you have a pixel art assignment with 12 multi-step equations on there.